Powered by Riverside FM.
In 1994, 7X3D Realms, Sierra, and Squaresoft employees founded a new development studio in Kirkland, Washington, right in the shadow of American computer giant Microsoft. The Big M would have an indelible influence on the studio, even before they were properly founded. When looking for a name, the team decided on one within an 8-character limit, due to MS-DOS's early restrictions. Taking inspiration from Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, this new studio would dub itself Monolith. Not to be confused with the developers of Xenoblade, Monolith Productions are still a well-known name within the games industry, with their most recent title released back in 2017. Some of the studio's best-known works are the Fear series, No One Lives Forever, and Condemned. These titles, and every other Monolith produced, were made possible by software that was originally designed for Microsoft, to demonstrate the future of games under DirectX. In that regard, Monolith have always been a developer on the cutting edge. But the studio did have to get a start somewhere. In the era before Microsoft millionaires revolutionized the FPS genre with Half-Life, shooters owed their design to id's Doom. It was so prevalent that many even built engines with the express purpose of outperforming what Doom could do. This is the starting point for Monolith. How would a new studio, founded on changing the industry, approach what was the hottest genre in video games? And in the years since, did they create the ultimate example of this classic format, right at the apex of first-person shooters changing forever? Well, on this episode of Bullet Time, we look at Monolith Productions' first-person shooter, 1997's Blood. You know, I suppose maybe we should get into things, which is, hi folks, welcome to Bullet Time, the video game podcast about the shooters that missed their marks. Again, this is an episode where that subtitle doesn't really apply. Actually, I don't know, maybe we'll kind of dig into it a little bit, kind of as we go along, but it's a subtitle that can kind of apply to a lot of different stuff. Sometimes it's games kind of forgotten about by time, sometimes it's FPS games that are like, you know, had a lot of cool ideas, but maybe like not all of them coalesce together. You know, it's all sort of all over the place, really. And this will be an interesting episode also in regards to why we're covering it, which leads me quite nicely into introducing our guest host for the episode, the Schönberg of video game literature himself, Kevin from PixelLit.
Hello, I am back again. As much as I'm back, baby.
We haven't you haven't been on in a while, and I say this both in regards to, by the time this episode comes out, you weren't on for at least 3 episodes beforehand, but also just because we record this stuff out of order. I don't know, it's been ages since we covered the FPS game.
It's been like a month and a half or something like that. It's,
you know what, when you say it's been a month, that doesn't feel like a lot of time has passed, but it just feels like a massive amount of time has passed between recording episodes. I think it's because we were doing them all back to front as well. And stuff that. So
yeah.
It was very busy.
It was a busy season.
It is the busy season, I know. I've already shown off my Christmas tree as well. It's the busy season of all, so it's all good. So what is good, though, we are also joined by a special guest to this episode, which I think if you listen to this podcast, and if you have a soft spot for FPS games, you probably know who this is, because this is a guest that I've wanted to get on. Basically, when we were coming up with like the idea of Bullet Time, it's like, well, what kind of guests do we want to have on? Like, who do we think would be a good fit? And considering your series on the Children of Doom and like your previous coverage of FPS stuff, it just sort of felt like, yeah, we kind of need to have you on Bullet Time at some point, which I suppose I'll also ask is like, how should I refer to you? Because you're a man who goes by many different names. Campster, Aaron Signal, or as other people may say, Chris. I mean, what would you rather?
Chris is fine. I mean, Aaron Signal's really more than the name of the show than anything.
Sure. Yeah,
it's not really a personal moniker, but like Campster's just a random online handle. So Chris is fine.
Yeah. Okay, Chris is absolutely fine. Chris is what we'll stick with. And yeah, as you said, Aaron Signal, name of the show. It's also the name of the YouTube channel, which basically it was like your channel and like Matthew Matosis, and I can't remember who the third one was, which was like back in 2012, 2013 when I really got into YouTube stuff. I was like, oh, these are my guys. This is like my first like introduction into video games and video game essays and kind of analytical video games writing as a whole. So it's like, oh wow. And that journey has led into eventually doing a podcast about mid-tier FPS games with sometimes Kevin as a guest host. So and it's been an interesting journey so far from the stuff that we covered, and
a lot of fun stuff.
A lot of fun stuff. I guess though, I would quickly ask you. So, what's your kind of like? So with FPS games, I mean, what's your? What do you not so much? What do you like about them? But it's like, what are the things about them that kind of like get you interested in writing about them? Essentially.
What gets the juices up,
That's hard.
Yeah,
what gets the juices flowing?
What gets the blood flowing?
Ah, there we go.
I think
That's why he has me.
It depends on when we're even talking about first person games, right? Because like there's retro FPS games, and I don't mean modern retro. I mean like FPS games from the 90s. And that's always interesting because it was such a clearly defined form, right? Sort of like id set the template and everyone had their own riffs on that. And you could sort of talk about it as its own little subgenre in its own little form. These days, first person is treated more like a perspective. I mean, like games like Elder Scrolls, which are not really shooters at all, the new Fallout, stuff like that. First person is just a perspective in modern games. So it's more about what the game is doing and, how it uses that verisimilitude that interests me. But historically, I like talking about, if you're talking about those 90s games, how each developer sort of put their own mark on that very kind of rigid formula for the time. And I think that's really interesting.
Which I think is very much the game that we're covering today is kind of, I think that's like where the most interesting conversation is waiting to be had. Because, folks, we're talking about Blood, not the substance, the video game by, I always keep saying Monolith Software, and I'm like, no, because those are the Nintendo guys, those are Xenoblade guys. Monolith Productions, their first game as a developer and their first FPS game as well, released in 1997. Now, I will say, because Chris, we did really want you on the podcast to just talk about FPS stuff, because again, as you said, there's the first-person shooters that kind of come after Half-Life and Medal of Honor, which are very more about like they're using the perspective to kind of tell kind of their own particular stories and have their own kind of particular worlds. But then you also have the stuff beforehand where it's like they're all kind of riffing on what id Software were doing, and they're like, Blood was kind of more of a choice in regards to Kevin, I asked Kevin, what's the game that we haven't thought about on Bullet Time yet that you think would be interesting? And this was your choice. And I guess I want to know, what's Blood? What is Blood to you?
So
what does blood mean to you?
What does blood mean to me? So there's a very specific story about blood.
Okay.
It was one of my closest friends' birthday, and Blood came out. We were 13, 14 years old, and it was like, okay, well, maybe I could get this for him. So we go to Software, etc., Electronics Boutique, what have you. We get Blood. I buy it. I wrap it up for him, and it's like, happy birthday. And he opens it up. He's like really happy about it. And then his mom sees the cover.
No.
And she confiscates it and says,
"Oh, wow.
not until you're older. And I go back to my mother, and I was like, his mom just kind of like took it and hid it somewhere. And my mom's like, well, if she's not going to let us give it to him, let's return it. And so it became this entire thing between my mom and his mom, where his mom was like, no, we're not. You gave it to us. Him gave it to him as a gift. You're not allowed to take it back. It was like, well, no, we're going to return it for something you can actually play. And we're like, no, that's not your decision to make. So it kind of became a battle between the mothers. And so forever, Blood has kind of stuck into my mind as like this forbidden fruit of a game, because my friend was literally banned from playing it. And the game sat in the safe in the back of her closet. I never know if he ever received it.
I was going to say, so she won the war essentially of...
she won the war, yeah.
I'm keeping her. And it's funny to think about, because is the cover of Blood the one that I think it is, which is just...
a handprint.
Completely black.
Handprint.
Yeah, bloody handprint and just the words blood. Very, like, Batman 89 in regards to... just have a black cover with a red handprint on it, and that's all you need to sell Blood.
Yeah.
But she looked at that and she was immediately like, "Oh yeah,
she was like, nope.
This is a heavy metal album of a game, not happening."
Veto. It's 1997. I mean, we're 7 to 10 years out of the Satanic Panic, but still, she was not having it.
It is funny though, because the game itself does very much like riff on that.
It does.
Yeah. I'm trying to like hold myself back a little bit, because it is kind of the thing of like, so Chris, like, very much like this was a game, like, did you play Blood when it came out?
I don't think I completely beat it. I was 12 when the game was released, but yeah, I did at least play through the shareware version, certainly. And I have played the other levels since that time, but I don't know. It's one of those games that has been around for me since my childhood, and I have played the shareware version repeatedly, but I can't tell you exactly when I played the non-shareware version. It's just sort of a bunch of memories that have collected over time as I've gone through and gone back and completed the game.
Yeah.
Okay. And I guess I was kind of like pointed at both of you then, it's just in regards to like, how did you become aware of Blood? Or was it just kind of one of those things of like, well, as like shareware games kind of come in and out, and it's just kind of like, hey, it's a new thing, let's give it a go, sort of thing.
I think my awareness of it was solely from the initial exposure sitting on the shelf of the video game store. I mean, I had gaming magazines, but I never really read those for like the PC stuff. It was mostly console focus at the time when I was reading that stuff. So I remember seeing there, and my friend was a PC gamer, and I was like, oh, that is awesome. And he loves like metal, and he's so into Quake, and he's so into these other things like Blood. That's perfect. And that was basically the leap in from knowing of it to buying it.
that was all you really needed. Like that was all the kind of the hook that you sort of needed. And it's kind of funny to think of like, you don't really have that today. Like you don't. Well, I guess like the modern equivalent would be going onto Steam and purely going by either screenshots or like if it was Game Pass, just going completely on the cover, which I don't feel like anyone does that nowadays. I guess it's because everything's.
I was going to say, I still do that whenever I'm looking for episodes of blips to highlight really small indie games. I go down the Micro Trailers Twitter account, because they just take the trailers from the various video games that get posted to Steam and truncate it down to random clips of about 2 seconds long each for a total of 10 seconds. And I can just get a real quick, easy idea of what the game is or whether it's worth looking into. But that's sort of a unique scenario, because I'm the weirdo looking for like things that are both weird and obscure but also interesting, and I don't think that's how most people shop for video games.
No, but it is funny, because I was going to say like maybe the modern equivalent of that is how I find out about most stuff, which is purely through Twitter and social media, as in like I will either find out from kind of like a big website account, like, this is a new thing that is coming out, or like, here's our review, here's some early preview footage of this thing, and it's like, oh, okay, or on the indie side, it's usually like a bigger account will retweet the smaller accounts of, we've been working on this project for X amount of months, so like, here's an early prototype of what we got. Like, there's a guy that I follow who I can't remember his name, but he nearly like every other day posts like little grey box demos that he makes in Unity, and like some of them turn into games, and then some of them go on to just like inform other stuff. But it's cool. It's like you kind of see that very quick iterative process happening in real time, which I guess maybe that's like the opposite of the 90s, where it's, here's thing, we made but then I guess maybe that's kind of cutting out, like a lot of people were on like boards at the time where maybe that kind of information was slowly dripping out. But
yeah, I mean, the 90s were very there were a few entries into finding out about things in the 90s. Yeah, you could have it through some message boards, some random GeoCities website. There's a whole lot. There were a whole lot. Then there was the gaming magazines, of which the PC coverage, depending on the magazine that you read, PC coverage would be hit or miss. And then in terms of, for me, the biggest pusher of finding games was like Blockbuster. I would just go to Blockbuster or whatever rental store I was going to at the time, and I would just scan the aisle, and I would look at the cover, and I would look at the back, look at the cover, and like, all right, this looks good,
Yeah, exactly. I'm literally judging this book by its cover, and it's a cool cover, so let's give it a go. Let's see what it's like.
Sometimes all you had,
I mean, what was it that we were saying about the because we did a Raven software series before this one, and right at the end we kind of put all the games, sort of like graded them on what was like what we thought the best one was and what was the worst one, and then we graded their cover arts, and pretty much number one was Heretic, because it's the only one which is like a painted piece of artwork, and it's this beautiful, like, almost looks like a D&D like module, essentially
beautiful
like,
stuff.
Oh yeah, I'm going to play that game. That game looks cool. This is where they ended up, which was just, there's a guy with his back to you, and just a piece of text art, and that's it. And it's like,
there's a guy with a gun.
Yeah, it's a guy with a gun. Oh god, like Bioshock's like the best example of that, where you go from the first one where it's like, wow, weird diving suit guy, you see a little bit of the world, this is so interesting looking, guy with a gun. Guy with a gun against a nice blue cloudy background.
Guy with a gun always wins somehow. It's like the this is going to be the second time I bring it up in the pod, but it's like the carcinization where all sea life eventually evolves into crabs. That's video game box art. Is all video game box art eventually evolves into guy with a gun.
Minecraft 2 will just be Steve holding a brick, like in his hand, but like in the pose of like a guy holding a gun.
Tetris 3 is just an L-shaped block with a gun.
There we go, yeah. Minecraft 2, you can now build guns, and it's just a big L-shaped block.
The L-shaped block is like holding a little square, like it's a child, and he's protecting it. And we've got the whole backstory of... Sorry.
Oh, yeah, they do... It's a cinematic adventure game where there's Steve and Little Steve, and Little Steve is like, you have to set a good example for him, but you still have to kill pigs, because that's, you have to eat the meat to stay alive. That's it.
Yeah. The Minecraft of us.
That ties us nicely around to Blood in some way, I guess. I think this is interesting for me though, because I was born in 91, so when this game came out, I was just sort of like, I'm 6, so like I haven't really developed much of like my knowledge around the world yet. I know that I like Super Mario 64. That's my guy. That's this is the fella that I want to chat to. So by the time that like I actually get into FPS games, it's Halo Combat Evolved, which feels like the end of all of these pushes forwards and tweaks and changes of because Blood I found just such an interesting kind of curio in regards to like, I don't want to like say my piece too early, but it does kind of feel like the end of the Doom era in regards to like, if the Doom era kind of kept going in its direction, what we'd eventually get is just kind of like bigger versions of Blood. But like the year afterwards, it's Half-Life, and that just kind of feels like, oh, every game from here on out,
everything is Half-Life.
Everything is Half-Life, and then like the year after that is Medal of Honor, and it's like, oh, that Medal of Honor took ideas from Half-Life, but like this is kind of what we want FPS games to be like from now on. And then you get Halo, which is sort of, we like GoldenEye, so that's going to kind of influence our multiplayer, but we also, this was an RTS game, so we have like all these big environments, and like you can see how that kind of then, a lot of that feeds into Battlefield, and then essentially, yeah, you kind of get this big spread of like games in all these directions.
A lot of family trees.
Whereas I don't see Blood in like any kind of modern game, apart from perhaps its own. But
yeah,
Kevin, say your piece. Kevin, go in.
Yeah, first I was laughing because the way you framed that statement earlier, it seemed like 6-year-old James was like, I know some things about the world, but Super Mario 64 is it's like you were saying that as a 6-year-old.
Oh yeah, no, I was very astute as a child.
You're an astute 6-year-old, precocious even.
I was waiting. That's what I mean. I was waiting for video essays. I had to watch Aaron Signal to realize, oh, this is what I've been doing for years. I just didn't realize you could put it on YouTube.
Exactly. You were recording them to VHS tapes. And the other thing I wanted to talk about. So we're talking about like the release of Blood. I just want to talk a little bit about what was going on in the world.
Let's put us in the
mindset. Okay, so it's 1997. Depending on which release date you're looking at, shareware or full release. That's shareware is March, full release is April. So in March, some tidbits of things that happened in the world. Bill Clinton bans federal funding going toward human cloning research. He then at the end of the month, The English Patient, the most Academy Award Oscar bait movie of Oscar bait all time, other than Crash, wins the Academy Award for Best Picture. And the same day, the DVD format is launched in the United States. And then a month later, just, for a weird story, a Pegasus rocket was shot out into space carrying human remains, making for the first space burial. And then
I was going to say, who was on board? Do you know?
Who was on board? I don't know.
Who were the remains of?
Just probably rich people that wanted to be shot off into space. Okay, now let's see. I pulled up the Billboard Top 100. Over in music, at the top of the charts at the time was "Wannabe" by the Spice Girls.
I was
mid-March.
thinking it might be the Spice Girls.
And it was followed by Can't Nobody Hold Me Down by Puff Daddy featuring Mace. Now, wider blanket zeitgeist, this is the year that Biggie was killed. So several of his songs were also popular, including Hypnotize, Mo Money, Mo Problems, and Puff also released I'll Be Missing You, which was his tribute to Biggie that he recorded with Faith Evans. So that was going on in the world at the time
of March 6th, 1997, which I believe is when the original shareware version came out. I could be totally wrong on that. But what was your thing on in regards to Blood? In regards to like, because again, like I think it's just such an interesting piece. Like going back to this, and I'll just say in regards to like, so how much should we all play of Blood? Be honest.
Yeah, I beat the first 2 episodes, halfway through the 3rd episode, and also halfway through Cryptic Passage, which was one of the episodes that was released later, I believe.
Yeah.
I did about the same. I have not touched any of Cryptic Passage. I've like I said, I've beaten all of it at various points.
Oh, yeah.
But for this specific podcast, I went back and replayed the first 2 episodes, got halfway through the 3rd, tried to get Blood 2 running just for notes, and then gave up pretty quickly because it does not run on modern hardware.
So In fairness, I wish I had tried to get Blood 2 running, because a lot of the research that I was doing into this, Blood 2 seemed to be kind of, not the more, but it seemed like it was interesting what they were trying to do with Blood 1 and how a lot of that tried to go into Blood 2. I played the first 3 episodes of this. I quickly tried to go through the other episodes that were... so just for clarification, I played the Nightdive re-release of this, which I think is quite an interesting thing as well, because I do quite like this recent trend of like them sort of remastering these games to the extent of, oh, I don't feel, like you don't have to have like the annoyance of DOSBox, but like they add like a couple of quality of life features to it. It's all, supports a ton of like monitor standards, and you can play with the controller, which is kind of that's my. I mean, again, I like Halo Combat Evolved, so it's like I like playing FPS games with a controller, but it's been really interesting replaying Blood that way, but also like I think it was either early. I think it might have been either last year or really early this year. Power Slave Exhumed. They did a remaster of that, which they essentially try to kind of like combine the PlayStation, the Saturn, and the PC ones together to kind of create like an ultimate, this is kind of what they were going for release, but with a lot of kind of like extra, bells and whistles to it as well. But it's been neat playing those alongside like all these kind of new retro revival FPS games, because it's like, oh, like, some of these games still work, like, in today's setting. Like, when you remove the barriers of trying to run these on newer machines, like, some stuff does, like, really hold up. And, like, in regards to, like, Power Slave, because I had never played, like, anything like it, like, nothing's really tried to do the sort of Metroidvania thing that it's done since. I was like, oh, this is really neat. Like, And I could see now that this is kind of more widely available. People could play this and go, hey, I'm working on an idea, or I have some concepts. Maybe I could plug in some stuff from this. Blood, on the other hand, was like a really polished, like, kind of greatest hits collection of, this is really cool, but I wonder how much of this could be carried forward, because I played those 3 episodes and then I thought, for contrast, I wanted to play a little bit of Duke Nukem 3D alongside it. The I can't, like, the anniversary release the Gearbox did like a couple of years ago, like, and I gave that a go, and I just wanted to weigh in regards to, because they were both build engine games, I was like, not so much which is better, but it's like, okay, these are like, people put these 2 on top of like, okay, this one does this stuff very well, this one does this stuff very well. How do they compare together? And I don't know, it was interesting just being like, Blood, it feels like Doom 2 in a way, or it's like if another developer with maybe more technical oomph behind it made Doom. Versus Duke, which is like, oh, well, Doom did this, but we can see all the ways that we can improve it. But also, the thing we like about Doom is the violence. And so we're going to kind of lean on that and do more of like an action. And it's weird because both games are kind of like movie pastiches as well, in the way that like Doom was a heavy metal pastiche.
Right.
Cover pastiche. I don't know. That was sort of like my thoughts on it. I don't know if anybody like felt similar in that way.
It was interesting to me to go back and play it, because I, earlier this year, had just done the 1997 episode of Children of Doom. So I had, and that was like in January, so it was a while ago, but I had to go get some pickup footage for that. And for Children of Doom, I try to do the like original versions of the game. So I had the Good Old Games release, and I was playing it the way I played it when I was a kid. So like A is jump, Z is duck, control is shoot, arrows to move, and also, the Good Old Games release has that difficulty bug that was never patched. So playing that was a brutal experience, because I'm playing Blood with a keyboard with no mouse and just getting demolished by monsters with this difficulty bug. And for the podcast, I went and replayed the Nightdive version, and it was night and day. Being able to play this game with like WASD, being able to strafe easily without having to hold down Alt and then strafe, but not being able to circle strafe, not being able to turn while doing that. It completely changed the way I played the game, and suddenly the game was like really fun. Like Blood's always been fun, but I think it's important to remember that this game, even though it is a build engine game that is deeply influenced by Doom and other like keyboard-based old-timey shooter games, it came out in 1997. That's after Quake. That's after mouses started to get really adopted as a first-person controller. And I think the game's really designed to be played like that. And I think I was playing it wrong as a kid.
Yeah. It is the weirdest thing, because the game there is a lot of verticality in it in a way that, like, especially the third episode where you start in what is essentially like a demolished city. Not like, even like Hollywood Holocaust or whatever the level's called in like Duke Nukem 3D, which is all about navigating those like destroyed skyscrapers. Nothing like really plays with verticality in the way that, which again, I will give it that, like in regards to if we were making a sequel to Doom using the build engine, how would we go about doing it? That feels like the ultimate thing in regards to, like this is way more 3D. Let's use that even to the extent of there's a lot of levels where you go underwater, which Duke 3D also does a lot of that. And those are the times where I was like, I can see why they put these in the game, because these are really good technical demonstrations, but they're not fun.
So and that's something I took away from playing Blood, is that the verticality is definitely more important in Blood than a lot of these other the other games that it was based on, so to speak. The other thing is environmental destruction is very important in Blood. Where it's like, oh, well, where do I go? And be like, well, have you tried throwing dynamite at the wall?
It's funny that and Duke do the same thing of like, because I remember this, there's a video with Derek Yu, the guy who did Spelunky, but a lot of other stuff beforehand, and he was talking about comparing the original Legend of Zelda to what they did later on. And what he really liked about the original was that there were things like bombable walls and whatever, but they looked like every other wall. So it was very much a thing of either testing stuff out or like communicating with people and saying, hey, like, have you figured out like the way forward? And then come Link to the Past, you know where to bomb because it has like a very obvious crack in the wall. And I don't know why, but like when I was playing the game, I was like, oh yeah, I know where to throw a bomb. There's a nice big crack there, but it's like if they didn't do that, you would be like, nah, I can't play this. They're like, where are they expecting me to go here?
Well, that's the thing. In the beginning of, I just want to point out, in the beginning of episode 3, in the first level, which I assume is like your apartment, maybe. I don't know. You can draw as much context or as little context as you want. There's no clear way to go until you shoot a painting off the wall. And that's where you see the crack, that it's a bombable wall. If you never knock that painting off the wall, then you're just like kind of wandering around like, I don't understand how I'm supposed to get out of here.
It's very Andy Dufresne in Shawshank Redemption, isn't it? And it's, funnily enough, Duke Nukem 3D does exactly the same thing in it. Again, not that I want to compare these games too often, but
Blood and the Rita Hayworth in the Blood Redemption.
Yeah, exactly. At least in Blood, though, it does kind of feel like it has got the id thing of, oh, they really like Dungeons and Dragons. They really like have, all these. Well, with Blood, it is very obviously like we really like horror films, so we're just gonna like recreate as much as what I can't remember what episode it is, but it's like. So the tone of this game's all over the place in regards to, you do the first set of missions and it's like turn of the century. You go to a church, then you're on an old-fashioned steam engine train, and then you go to a carnival, and it's like, okay, yeah, this could be like Dust Bowl era or like the 1910s or wherever like that. And then you get to the third like set of stuff, and it's like you're in a city, and it's like, okay, fair enough, maybe time has changed. And then which is the one where it just has the mole from Dawn of the Dead in it. I think that's like I think it's like episode 4, maybe. Like I said, sure. I hopped around a lot, but it was purely just did feel like, here's things we like, and here's how we're going to remake them in the build engine.
I want to say probably the primary inspiration, if I was to pick one above the others, is the Evil Dead movies. because of kind of the way the guy does little quips occasionally, but specifically the evil hand is the audio tell for the evil hand being in the room is the "I'll swallow your soul," from Evil Dead. So I want to say it's very heavily Evil Dead inspired. Obviously, other horror tropes and inspirations work their way in there, but if there's one vibe above all, I think it's supposed to be Sam Raimi's Evil Dead.
Oh no, I was going to say, it's funny, it's just very hodgepodgey in a way that, like, Duke Nukem 3D is also very kind of hodgepodgey, but more so in the regards to just, like, we like Die Hard and we like Commando, and it's just, like, we're not going to, like, totally recreate these things. That's just sort of the tone that we're putting in. And Outlaws, which we covered really, like, I say early on, but, like, a good few episodes ago on Bullet Time, where that's like, oh, well, we're LucasArts, and it's like, we really want to make a Western movie, so we'll have all the Western tropes in it, but it's nothing, like, specifically like this. Versus Blood, where it's like, the first level in, like, episode 2 is them going to the Antarctic in, I can't remember what Lovecraft novel it is, but it is, like, the one where they go on the Arctic expedition,
Right.
Yeah, the game opens with a line from Army of Darkness, and I think Army of Darkness casts a long shadow over, I guess, Apogee / 3D Realm / Build Engine game developers in general, just because that was the time they were developing in, and it's the sort of game that mixes quippy one-liners and action stuff and horror stuff all together, which is why it shows up in Duke Nukem, it shows up in Blood, it shows up everywhere for that whole decade of shooters.
Yeah. And I want to say just real quick, I want to say I would say any game that is kind of horror shooter aesthetic that uses a chainsaw is really pulling it from Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness, like the idea of the chainsaw as this, heroic weapon, I think is kind of pulled from that.
Oh, and then, like, in the second episode, you have the overlooked hotel, and you have the hedge maze and stuff like that. So,
right,
they're pulling all that stuff from everywhere, which again is cute in a way that, like, Duke Nukem 3D, because it's like, well, we're not doing Die Hard, but we have a guy who's just kind of like John McClane turned up a couple more notches, and it's like, this hasn't aged super well, and. It's been the one thing in regards to do we ever do a build engine series, but it's like the only one that we'd really want to talk about is like, apart from this and maybe is like Rise of the Triad, right? Because I don't think either of us want to talk about Shadow Warrior because it has just all redneck rampage, because both of them, like, interesting developer histories, I get. Well, Redneck Rampage, I guess, is the interesting developer history, but, like, I don't want to play either of those games. That's all.
Yeah, I think they're too bad to be mid.
Redneck. I have played Redneck Rampage recently. It does not. It plays measurably worse than Blood does. Ignoring all the other context and all the other things that happen in that game, it just does not play well.
The most interesting thing about it is the fact that was it Zaytrix that made it, who then went on to do, like, Return to Castle Wolfenstein?
Didn't they also do... No, they did... Zaytrix were the guys that did Kingpin, right? I feel like that's true.
Oh, yeah, Kingpin Life of Crime, which we're thinking about covering that at some point, because it is just such, like, an interesting, like, curiosity, which... Like, they're meant to be doing, like, a Nightdive style remaster of that at some point, but it just says on the Steam page, like, ready when it's ready. So it's very up in the air what's happening with that.
Okay, so they did do Return to Castle Wolfenstein, but they changed their names, I guess, in the wake of Kingpin.
No, we don't want people to know that we worked on that, so it's funny because it's like, it's Return to Castle Wolfenstein, and then did they get, like, folded into Activision or something like that? Because, like, that's, like, the last game they make, right? God, not that we should be talking about other developers when we're trying to talk about Blood, I suppose.
We could,
That's just how it goes.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, Monolith are in it again. Monolith was a thing as well that we kind of went back and forth on, like, should we do them as a series? But the thing is like, they do have a lot of interesting FPS games, but I feel like I would want to just maybe pull out the best ones and just do those as individual episodes than maybe the entire timeline of them, because I'd say that, like, this is maybe their most kind of interesting historical point in regards to, like, so Blood wasn't originally conceived by Monolith, who is, like, two of the developers that would end up at the studio, Jace Hall and oh gosh, what was the other fella's name? I will carry on the story though, at least, which they both had come up with this game while they were under Apogee West. And they were working on this for a while, but then eventually it ended up at Monolith. Monolith, who, the most interesting thing that I learned about them was originally they weren't in the games industry. They were a classic 90s multimedia company. They did 3D rendering and, like, software stuff for, like, Encarta and all these kind of, like...
Really?
You know, it's sort of like, that's sort of like FromSoft, which FromSoft started their life making software for farms, for, like, farming, for, like...
Oh, yeah, that's right. And because that's how Hideki... sorry, not Hideki. Yeah, I was going to say Hideki Kamiya, but that's the guy from Platinum.
Miyazaki.
Yeah, so that's how Miyazaki ended up at the company, because they brought him on because he was in the banking industry, and they brought him on as kind of like a project manager kind of guy because he...
Yeah. So it's fascinating though, learning that some of these companies were like, yeah, we're not even in games, and eventually end up stumbling into games somehow.
I'm shocked to hear that they originated as a 3D rendering company, given the quality of the cutscenes in Blood, but
that was a treat when I got to the end of the first episode of Blood, and it was like, oh, I'm glad to see that the guys from the Money for Nothing video are still getting work, as he puts his wife to rest,
moving like this.
Yeah, just a couple of cubes translating. God, yeah, the 3D.
Yeah, gave me original Twisted Metal vibes for some reason.
Oh God, yeah, Tin Toy vibes is what it gave me.
Yeah,
just like really early pixel.
Well, it's
Chris. What is?
Go ahead,
Chris. What do you? So if you had to, like, say what your high points and low points of the game are, what would you say? Like, in terms of recently playing, like what are the vibes you get? Good vibes, bad vibes.
I would ironically say the vibes are some of my favorite parts of the game. I mean, I really do dig the horror, comedy, cowboy, gothic, western thing it's going for. And it really kind of stood alone in doing that up until Cryptic, which we can talk about later. But it really is kind of cool the way it has this, like, distinct... It's got a very distinct feel to the world it builds. The low point is anytime I had to shoot something at higher or lower than 45 degrees from me.
So this game does commit the bullet time bingo. It does commit one of the sins of small, fast-moving, flying enemy.
Yeah.
Especially because we did the early Raven Software stuff, so like Heretic and Hexen, and that game is full of them, because it's like, it's D&D, flying goblin, flying gargoyle guys. This game needs to have them, and it's like, it doesn't. They are the worst enemies in this game.
And if they're directly overhead, you can't look up. Your character is the
cycle back. Yeah.
Your character is the hypothetical dog from Shaun of the Dead. Can't look up.
In regards to, because we were talking about the hand earlier, which is funny because you both said I hadn't seen Evil Dead 2, so when the hand turned up, I was like, oh, it's an Addams Family reference, of course it is. And this is like, oh wait, no, Evil Dead probably makes more sense, I would say, considering all the other references
in Evil Dead 2. Yeah, in Evil Dead 2, his hand gets possessed by, like, a deadite bite, I think. He ends up chopping it.
That's why he has the chainsaw. Whereas
he chops it off, and then he builds a connection so that his chainsaw becomes a hand. Yep. Their hand becomes fair
enough. This game also has like a lot of spider enemies in this game, which I was just kind of a bit like, never a fan of seeing a spider enemy in an FPS game. That's
bullshit.
just me.
Yeah, bullshit tiny enemies. Another. I'd say that's a double mark on the bingo card of the bullshit tiny enemies. So triple. Okay, so we got the hands. Which is there a way to like knock them off? By the way,
I just hit use,
or
just tap use.
Just tap use. Okay, I'd never put that together because I was like, I guess I'm dead now. Every time they got on my throat. So there's the hand, there's the spiders, which if you get bit by them, they fuck up your camera.
Yeah, at least I appreciated that, is that they do swarm you, but then their attacks are just kind of like, oh, we'll just play around with the camera, which...
It's just a status effect rather than like, actual damage. There's the flying creatures. Those are all pretty obnoxious enemies. That's a 3 for...
Also the rats.
Also the rats. And the bats.
And the bats.
Like, the bats don't follow people. They just fly out. And then in this game, like, there's bats, like, trailing me because I'm not going to bother shooting you. Just go away.
You're a really tasty guy. You came back from the dead and you're just, like, covered in syrup. So all these animals are just like, oh, yeah. Or they're all in cahoots with the cultists, I guess. I will give it this, because this game reminded me a ton of Outlaws, mostly just because of the fact that it's a really early century setting. But at least the benefit of this game is that a lot of enemy variety, which, again, some of the enemies were really annoying, but I did kind of appreciate that, not quite to Doom's level of, like, every enemy serves its own little purpose and gets you to cycle through weapons. Like, all the kind of... I don't know, all the weapons in this game, then they're cool, I guess, but they mostly felt like the thing of when you had to go down to like a shotgun or a pistol, it's like, oh, well, like this feels like a downgrade. It doesn't feel like everything kind of has its own, fits into a nice little thing, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I use the double barrel, the shotgun for like 99% of everything I did. Only because the hitbox on explosions, so like using TNT, is like you could never really tell when you're going to take damage from an explosion. And the Tesla cannon's fine, but it just felt like there wasn't enough ammo. Either there wasn't enough ammo or I just never picked it up and I would be getting ammo for it. Not having a Tesla cannon.
A lot of pickups in this game as well where I didn't totally figure out what they did, like the one which was like reflection, where it makes the screen blue and it's like, okay, so is this reflecting enemies' attacks or is it doing something else? I'm not super sure.
It's supposed to make your bullets bounce off the walls, but it's really hard to visualize that with like hit scan weapons, and you don't use non-hit scan enough for it to
No, and again, like, you don't see, like, bullet casings come off or anything like that because it's not quite, the engine isn't quite sophisticated enough to do that, so, Yeah. I don't know, like, this is kind of why it's going back to me at the beginning saying that it's, like, this is a really interesting game, but, like, I don't know, it is funny. It does remind me so much of when we were going through Heretic and Hexen, and just how... Hexen, where it felt like they were really kind of pushing against the edges of like what the Doom engine could achieve. But then comparing that to Heretic, where it was still very like Carmack had to come in and say, can you just make it like Doom in a fantasy skin? And like in regards to that, they were just kind of like, no, we're not. We're gonna try and push like as much as we can. But then as a result, like going back and playing Doom, it still feels really good because I think it's because of that like level of streamlining that it has versus Heretic, where it's very clunky and chunky.
Right.
And I kind of had a feeling of that when playing Doom and Blood back to back, where maybe it's because Duke was the first game they made with build. They were like, oh, we can't like achieve everything that we want to, so let's try and limit our vision a little bit. But then that makes it a lot faster and a bit better pace than Blood, where it is very big and very exploratory, which is really cool that it does that. But then as a result, it's kind of like levels go on like some levels go on for just minutes at a time, which, especially in these kind of old FPS games, you just kind of feel like, cut some of the sectors out. Make this one key rather than 3 keys.
Yeah.
I don't want to find 3 keys. Just make it one.
This is a game that has 6 key columns. I want to point that out. Like that's a little much.
No, and it is. And
oh
again,
yeah, it's
with
like
Hex,
it's the eye, it's the dagger, it's the moon, it's the thing. There's the hotel level. I want to say, I actually never beat it. I had to enter in the code to skip the level because I was at that point I had killed everything, and I was wandering around and I couldn't figure. Go ahead.
That level has 2 exits because that also has a secret level inside of it, and we still couldn't get it.
Yep.
Oh God, it's 200% more exits, and I was still like, I don't know where the fuck I'm going, and
No.
I saved the game and I like put it down for a little bit because I was playing, I was loving blood, and then I got to that level and I was like, okay, whatever. So I put it down. A couple weeks ago, I pick it back up in preparation for this episode, and I'm just like, I load into my save and I'm like, now I'm even less sure of where the hell I was going in this.
Yeah. And it's funny because, like, the whole, like, when we were doing the Hexen 2 episode, the thing that I was saying to you that I really loved about it was that you could still see the very obvious key and lock structure that even Quake had, but they did as much as they could to make it look like, oh no, you're going on a quest to get some items. And like the example that like I like really early on is you have to find like an old wizard's bone, and put it in a mill and turn it into bone.
You have to
meal so
grind
you can put it in a potion,
right?
Yeah, and it's very obvious. Like it's spinning on the ground like a key card, like in like in Doom. You know exactly what it is, but because they go to that extra level of trying to dress it up a little bit, like it's like that is appreciated. Versus again with Blood,
hide the key,
the keys, the keys. They're just 6. It's just 6.
It also suffers from the fact that the levels are very densely populated in a way that I don't think Duke Nukem is. And to some extent, that's to Blood's benefit, right? You walk into a room and there's like cups and bottles and books and like it's incredibly detailed for a build engine game. That's one of my favorite things about it. But also like when there's like one key that gates your way forward and it is in a small cubby that opens after you flip a switch on the other side of the room, it is so easy to miss that little cubby opened up when you flip the switch that you now spend 10 minutes walking around the entire level going, where the hell's the key? I've opened it. I've been in every room.
No, I absolutely agree with you because it's like, especially in the Nightdive version of it, they've turned a lot of these items into voxel objects, and so it's just really cool, like seeing all these 3D props in the level. But I had exactly the same thing happen on the train level, where it's a Duke Nukem style gimmick where you flip a switch and then something opens behind you really quickly, and then you just have to grab it. But like in Duke Nukem, they are gimmicks, as in you flip a switch and it will change something in the level, but it doesn't really... It's not super important for the progression ahead. I guess like maybe like in the first level where you have to open the curtains on the cinema screen, I guess that is a gimmick in regards to, well, I wouldn't think to turn on the projector, but the way that level is designed does kind of naturally push you towards that.
Sure.
So it's not...
Yeah.
This is, again, with Blood is really interesting in regards... And again, this is how I kind of go back to what I said really early on, which is this feels like the ultimate... Well, this kind of feels like FPS games could have kept being Blood and kept, like, becoming denser and more, like, adding more keys and stuff like that, where it almost kind of felt like something like Half-Life was maybe kind of inevitable in regards to... Well, the FPS genre could keep going in this direction, but then it becomes incredibly more and more niche.
Yeah.
Because it's like playing to the people who really like this.
Right.
But then Half-Life comes along and it's like, no, we want to lower the floor enough that like everybody can get on. And in some respects, it is like a shame because like Blood does a lot of really cool things to it, which come from the fact of it has this kind of, sectors and layers design to it, but then it's really, and again I think this was why I really wanted to do this episode with you guys, because you played these games when this was what FPS games were, versus coming back and seeing these, like, even with all these kind of Nightdive bells and whistles, has been like a really interesting experience of like, oh, these owe more to like Labyrinth or like Maze game design stuff.
I think the thing that's interesting about Blood is there definitely was an attempt to take your basic Doom formula or your Duke Nukem and make a little, almost in the Hexen 2 vein, give it a little bit of a dress it up a little bit, so that some of the switches, some of the destructible elements, things like that. So I think that was kind of different for the time. But then it's all of that is overwritten and kind of blown out of the water by Half-Life. Just saying like, oh yeah, you know, it's that, those concepts, and then Half-Life just does every single one of those concepts in a perfect game design execution, where there is really no moments of what do I do now? Whereas Blood, I felt like, even though the levels, if you know where to go with the levels, you can nail most of them in like 3 to 5 minutes, right?
Oh, yeah.
But there were levels in Blood where I was lost for like 10 minutes. And in a first-person shooter that thrives in a visceral, fast-paced first-person shooter that Blood is, when you're engaging with the enemies, that exploration element ultimately comes up very short, because it's like, as Chris said, I threw a switch, a thing opened, but you don't have any clue or guidance as to what that thing was.
There's literally a level where Caleb throws a switch and he says verbatim, wonder what that did.
Yep. I wonder what the fuck, whatever that was.
Hopefully that helps.
That did something, and then you turn around and it's like, oh, there's a couple new enemies, maybe where they spawn. Like, then you throw another switch, and then you climb up the stairs and you throw another switch, and then it was like, buddy, guys, come on, this could have been a single switch.
And again, a lot of that could just be down to the fact that this was their first game as an FPS developer.
Sure.
And it's one of those things that it's like with Miyamoto. It's, you know, by the time Super Mario 64 came around, he was already in the games industry for over 15 years at that point. So he was kind of like, you know, if something changes, show the player, you know, give them room to kind of experiment and stuff like that. And again, if they kept making games like Blood, it could have been the case of, things are a lot more.
Would you say that
obvious.
That Blood is the Super Mario 64 of build engine games?
Sort of, because I would also say, because Half-Life is the Super Mario world in regards to, it's very straightforward and things kind of happen one after the. Maybe it's more like Super Mario Galaxy, which is kind of like their back to Jesus moment of, oh, Sunshine, we're really off the track at this point. And it's like, I think people don't really like 3D Mario games. Let's make them a little bit more 2D, because people understood those. And so with Half-Life, it's just kind of, well, it's nice. It's activity after activity after activity. They keep, like, because of the linear structure that it has, they can sort of keep you entertained as it goes along. Versus
maybe that just should be
structure like this, where you could go anywhere.
Yeah, let's just make that our bit going forward, where all first-person shooters have to be compared to a Mario game, and
yeah, there you go.
I think that'll be.
I think audiences would really.
I think the audiences would really like that. You know, people love it when two very disparate things are compared to each other. So
that's why you have to compare stuff to food, because at least that's
or Dark Souls. Food or Dark
Souls. Yeah, there you go. Food and Dark Souls. Blood is really neat though, and again, like, I did feel like it did give me a lot of Doom vibes in regards to just the horror setting. And again, like, even though all the episodes then kind of go off and, oh, I guess this is in a city now. Oh, I guess this is in like a mall now. It's still there is still a lot of unifying tone to it, which is very neat. But I don't know, I think the whole reason that I keep mentioning Half-Life as well is because, just to quickly go back to talking about that they started as a multimedia company. So the reason that I should have maybe looked and played Blood 2 was that was meant to be the first DirectX like game, because Monolith were working with Microsoft on DirectX
right
at the time.
Yeah.
But then when that kind of fell out in regards to, they went in a different direction with it. And so their experimentations then turned into Blood 2 and the Lith engine, which is what they have been using pretty much different increments and developments on that ever since.
Right.
Like, even up to Shadow of War, like their last game that came out is built on a version of the Lith engine, which is
interesting,
crazy to think about. And then you kind of look at like Half-Life, which is literally Valve was started by Microsoft millionaires, and the whole reason was because like it wasn't so much Gabe, but it was the other guy that he started Valve with, whose name has completely gone. I've completely lost it at the moment, but I have it in my notes. They were looking at Doom when they were working on like Windows 3.0, and then like eventually on NT. They saw like the enormous success of Doom in '95 and the fact that it was selling more copies than Windows, and they were like, oh, this is kind of where technology is going. This is where software is going. People really like games could be the next frontier in regards to where we should be looking next. And I almost wonder, like they kind of looked at the success of Doom, but then went, here's our take on it,
right,
which is way more kind of user-focused and a lot more streamlined, which is how you end up with Half-Life.
Right.
Versus Blood, which is the natural development of Doom, but bigger.
Yeah.
And you keep making it bigger and bigger and bigger, And
yeah,
it's just
I don't know. I mean, I guess you could say that. Like, you could say that Half-Life is a redesign of... Half-Life is more a redesign of the first-person shooter, whereas Blood was a continuation of where the first-person shooter started.
That.
Yeah. And Chris, since you did a lot of FPS studying, would you say that that's kind of accurate?
I definitely think that there is some sort of weird dividing line between, pre and post Half-Life. I certainly think that when Half-Life comes out, its degree of polish and its focus on sort of being a narrative, a continuous narrative story, is so fundamentally different from the way that games work in this era. Like, we talk about jumping around in Blood, in between chapters. The third chapter takes place in France, and the only reason you know that is one of the levels is a bank that has giant French flags. Like, there's no other way to know that. Like,
right.
Blood is technically like an international hopping adventure, and there's no way to know that based on the game. Whereas once you reach Half-Life, each level sort of plays into the next one, and it very much is about contextualizing your actions. So if there's any major change, I think it's the change from what is the coolest way we could render this room or this level to what is the game as a whole? How does the game flow? How do we move through the entirety of the space? And I think that fundamentally changed the way we look at these things, probably for the better, because like we keep saying, Blood has pacing issues level to level or even within levels in ways that Half-Life really doesn't.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I guess it is interesting, it's like kind of coming onto the podcast and sort of looking back on these games, like there is nothing like Blood, like even in regards to like you have all the new Blood games which are very inspired by Quake or inspired by kind of like the early Doom games. I mean, even Ion Fury, which is like a brand new build engine game, none of them really feel like old build games. And I do wonder whether it's just kind of a fact of like that new kind of FPS design is so ingrained now in regards to, well, this is the correct way to do it. Or maybe it's just like people aren't really quite sure how do you like meaningfully evolve on like what Blood was doing,
and
other than big.
Right. I would say probably the retro shooter revival has kind of had some games that are in that vein, especially when we talk about how like Blood was broken down by episodes and the narrative doesn't totally matter between the episodes. Like episode 1, he rises from the grave to save his wife, fails at doing that, and then it's like, well, I guess I'll just fuck around now and do other things.
Well, no, he goes to redeem the other of the four. I hate that I know this. He goes to
go for it.
He goes to kill.
Yeah, there's four.
There are four chosen, and Caleb is one of the chosen, and they are. I think they're all the playable characters in Blood 2: The Chosen. And so it's like Caleb, his wife, Gabriel, and another guy whose name escapes me at the moment. And the opening cutscene involves all of them dying to the respective bosses of each episode. So each episode involves Gabriel or Caleb going and getting vengeance for his fallen chosen by killing the monster that Chernobog or whatever big bad guy sent to kill his friends. But it still makes no sense because like the second episode ends with the spider that killed, I believe, Gabriel, and then Caleb like tears Gabriel's heart out, apologizes to Gabriel, and drinks his blood, and there is no context for what that does. He's not any stronger in the subsequent episodes. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and that's
really
I feel like that spider kind of, and then I think I see that same exact spider model in episode 3. That was like the boss in episode 2. It's like, oh, isn't that the slightly larger than normal spider? Like when I was fighting the spider at the end of episode 2, I was like, all right, well, when does the actual boss show up? And then you kill the spider, and you're like, oh, okay. It was just a slightly larger than normal spider compared to the rest of the spiders.
Well, it also undercuts the narrative thrust of this, that it does the first person shooter thing. Like Doom did this too, where like cyber demons in Doom 1 were the big boss of one of the episodes, and then by the time you're in Doom 2, they're just an enemy. This game does that too, but like when the really big gray gargoyle that killed your wife, and you kill it and get vengeance for your wife, but then an episode later, there's like 3 of them a level, and you're just nuking them left and right. It kind of loses the importance of that being a bespoke moment for Caleb to get that vengeance when,
when it's a non-specific thing. Whereas, and I think Doom does do that better than Blood does.
And I think the reason Doom does it better is because it doesn't have the focus on story that Blood does.
Right.
The story of Doom is literally you get like a block of text at the end just to be like, but his fight isn't over yet. And it's like, oh, okay, thanks, I guess.
They killed his bunny.
Yeah, well, that's the end of... is that the end of 2 or is that the end of one of the episodes in 1? I can't remember.
That's the end of 1, I think, because
That's the end of 1 because he goes back to Earth and he finds out that they killed his rabbit.
That's it, yeah. Which again, I think is really interesting. And again, I think maybe this is why this is like such an interesting game to talk about on like Bullet Time, because this is like the perfect example of like really ambitious, but it is just butting heads with the fact that it is so like tied to, it has to be like Doom, because like no one has quite figured out yet how do we move on from doing a Doom style FPS game yet. Like we have keys in the game because Doom had keys and people really like Doom, so like let's not rock the boat too much. And you get Half-Life, which has little activities. Some of them you might have to get a key, but like it isn't that kind of loop-de-loop design that like John Romero came up with in 1993 essentially. And again, I do kind of wonder in regards to Blood is like, it isn't, because like you wouldn't want to say it'd be better if it was more like this or better if it's more like that, because Blood is Blood at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But does feel like it does feel like it is being pulled in 2 different directions. And again, with like Monolith, it's so interesting that they were on the cutting edge of where technology would eventually go.
Yeah.
But they wanted to make an FPS game, but they made a build engine FPS game, which was so very much designed to be Doom's competitor.
And and I think the retro shooter thing I was bringing up earlier. So Dusk is very much feels in that vein, even though Dusk is more of a Quake-like rather than the 2D forced perspective Doom and build engine games. But also another game that I played a little bit of it recently is a game called Cultic, which is very much when you play it, you're like, this feels like the continuation of kind of where Blood was in terms of like tone and all that stuff. I feel like Cultic is very much like a Blood successor, and Cultic only came out, was it this year? This year or last year?
October, I think. But no, Cultic is great, and it very much is almost a direct spiritual successor to Blood in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Speaking of weird spiritual successors to Blood, I did find an interesting fact about this game, which I guess would nicely lead us into the quiz, which is that Blood inspired a Korean manga called Priest, which came out back in the early 90s. And then they did a film adaptation of Priest in 2009, starring Paul Bettany. And it was a big Hollywood production. So there is a film adaptation of Blood out there, which you can go and watch. Apparently it's not very good, though. But it's an adaptation from somebody who really liked Blood back in the 90s, writing a manga inspired by it, and then somebody being inspired by that manga, making a film about it. Weirdly enough, it was it either came out the same year as, or a year after, another film called Legion, which also starred Paul Bettany, and both films had exactly the same director, and I think they were just shot back to back with one another.
Interesting.
But, yeah, very weird. But yeah, so
wild.
sometimes these old things can go on to inspire new things, and by new I mean a film from 12 years ago at this point. So.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. It came out the year after Legion.
Yeah.
That's and they were both the same director, Scott Stewart.
Yeah, Scott Stewart and Paul Bettany is the lead in both films.
Yeah,
they both. Most of them just must have got on really well.
Paul Bettany's vampire hunter phase.
It is funny because apparently that's what the manga is about, is vampire hunting, and it's you don't hunt vampires in Blood, though. I mean, it's called Blood.
I mean, it's cultists and the Zambos that the cultists mostly seemingly two very specific types of zombie. The skinny dudes with the axes and
cloaks,
and the thick boys with the spit.
Yeah, the large boys feel like such a. Again, the game is meant to be set in 1910s, 1920s or whatever, but they just look like yob characters from like a game about football hooliganism.
Yeah,
they're just a bunch of big guys in white vests, and it's just are they really good fit for this? Maybe they had vests.
It also feels like those guys are they're just dropped into the level of you know what? They probably have too much ammo at this point. So let's thin out their ammo pool a little bit, because they're not hard. They don't do that much damage to you or whatever, and are easy to avoid, but they just take fucking forever to kill.
Just as a quick question to you then, Kevin, before we move on.
Sure.
Because again, we're still very up in the air about whether we will cover other Monolith stuff. Well, I guess first things first, how much other Monolith stuff have you played other than this?
So we're talking about Rise of the Triad.
No, not the build engine stuff.
Okay.
Well, actually, I guess I'll ask you that. Does this sit at your favorites in regards to the build engine games?
I would say Blood is probably up there as I prefer Blood to Duke Nukem. I think that's the big. I don't have a huge. I came to Duke Nukem relatively late, and I was I can kind of see. I mean, but this is also terrible in terms of in terms of subject matter. I mean, it's not terrible. It's just okay, this is very mid 90s. Oh yeah, that was funny. In 1995, guys.
Yeah, Blood feels like a game that your parents don't want you to play just because of the the
gore,
genre that it's playing in, and its references. Well, Duke Nukem feels like a gag from The Simpsons of like, we just designed the most like caustic game, like your parents won't let you play.
Yeah, I mean you're basically playing McBain from The Simpsons and Duke Nukem.
Basically, yeah. God. I guess as the follow-on then, did you prefer Blood to Hexen? Because we played Hexen quite a while ago, and I would say that Hexen is like, outside of the fan stuff, that's maybe or maybe Strife, which I guess we haven't really covered yet. That's about as advanced as like the Doom engine kind of.
I would put. I think I would put Blood above. Wait, so which one was the first one? I can never remember. It's Hexen, Heretic.
Oh, well, I mean, it's better than Heresy. Heretic's not even part of the conversation here. I think.
Is it better than Hexen? No, I would say I would not.
Oh, interesting.
I don't think I would put it above Hexen because I think Hexen generally is just a more interesting game. It has a lot of cool stuff going on. But so yeah, I personally I don't think I would put it above Hexen. I don't know, Chris, if you have an opinion on that. I don't know if you've.
Yeah, I mean,
I have not played enough of Heretic or Hexen to really have a super strong opinion. I would probably put Blood as among my favorite build engine games. Like it's neck and neck with Duke Nukem. I think just for the tone alone, I would lean more towards Blood. But I mean, the problem is once you start looking at the rest of the build engine games, there's not actually that many good ones to pick from. Like it's,
oh no, absolutely
I mean, like it's better than Extreme Paint Brawl. It's better than Nom. It's better than Redneck Rampage. You know, Shadow Warrior has moments of goodness in between a lot of problematic stuff. So no.
Buried in that sweet racism, there's some decent stuff.
The best, I think the nicest thing about Shadow Warrior is eventually they would remake it, or I guess do a spiritual like successor to it. And the first that first Shadow Warrior game is pretty decent. You know, it's all right. 2013 one. And I guess Rise of the Triad. I mean, we have to play it at some point because you've mentioned Rise of the Triad a couple of times, Kevin. And I guess it's just been neat to give that a go.
I think. Go ahead.
I was going to say it goes for something really different than pretty much any of the other build engine games. It doesn't have verticality the way this game has verticality, but it plays with verticality in its platform. It's a very different kind of shooter, I think.
Yeah,
interesting.
And I think I'm just fascinated. I'm just interested in getting into it only because I like the idea that it's like basically the stuff, the plot and storyline elements that Tom Hall created for Doom he would eventually use for Rise of the Triad.
Yeah, just interesting to compare those two things together.
Because I know Tom Hall was the big in terms of like guys that the earliest of the original id crew to kind of get forced out because he couldn't hang with Carmack's sensibilities, so to speak. I would say Tom Hall is is an interesting person to look at.
And again, it is the weirdest thing about going through all of these old sort of 2D era FPS games that we've been doing for bullet time in regards to, just with all of them, I hear Carmack's thing of strip it out. This is pure, like, you know, with the first Wolfenstein game, he's like, cut the stealth, it's boring, just purely focus on like this. I wrote this engine to draw wars as quickly as possible, so let's have like the player going through as quickly as possible, and then like let's build on that for Doom. They should always be running at like 60 miles an hour. Things should be quite straightforward. And like on one end you go, oh, it's because he's a programmer and he doesn't want to do that much work. But then you look at it again and it's like, oh no, actually, maybe he was kind of, maybe it's his sensibilities, but he might have been onto something. Because then when we play stuff like, I mean, Heretic especially was, and again, there were moments in Blood where it gave me a lot of Heretic flashbacks where they try to make like a cute medieval village, but within the limitations of the Doom engine. So it's just a lot of cubes that like you go, oh, that's where the local inn is. Oh, that's where the haberdashery is, and it's like,
right.
No, they're just cubes. They're just untextured cubes.
Yeah.
Like, what am I looking at here? You know?
Yeah.
And then again, like they're really like the thing that I really love about them is how ambitious and interesting they are, but it is so much like butting heads with what the engine was designed for. And then again with build, it's like Duke, because Duke was so like kind of, they were developed in tandem with one another. It isn't like it can't do all the bells and whistles that Blood can, but like as a result, that simplicity does make it a lot easier to return to. But
sure.
Yeah, it's neat. And again, it's cool. And again, going all the way back to what I said, it's like, you can see how maybe you get to the immersive sim a little bit earlier. Because I mean, that was what you noted when we were playing Hexen 2, where there is a lot in it that feels like.
Hexen 2 definitely has some really early sim like stuff in it, where it's like, oh, you know, the way to do this is pick up a barrel and move over to the stairs and jump on the barrel and jump on the stairs, which is not a thing in first-person shooters, like absolutely not. At the time that it was released.
And it's funny because like you don't have like System Shock without Ultima Underworld, which was that came out the same year as Wolfenstein 3D, and they're like two engines doing two completely different things. But then you kind of see with Raven Software, like, oh, we kind of want to do a little bit of what they're doing, and while John Carmack's saying don't, they're still like trying as much as they can. Like they work in an inventory, they work in like all these extra details. And again, like after Blood, do you see something like a Deus Ex where it's built out of kind of 2D planar stuff, but like they've added all these Duke Nukem style interactables. They get more of the kind of RPG elements in the Hexen was like kind of hinting towards. It's neat. And like, it's funny because like you have Half-Life and like every game's then you have Medal of Honor and every game kind of follows after that. But then BioShock comes back in 2007 and it's like, oh, we can maybe do instant, like that's the thing of like, well, we want to be like a straightforward shooter, but we also want to bring these instant elements back. And then we start to go back to that kind of design again.
Yeah.
And then people stop making instant games again after. Well, I guess you get to Deathloop where it's like, actually, let's make it a bit more like a shooter.
Yeah.
People don't really like
I would say
stuff too much.
I would say there's an alternate universe or an alternate history where at some point after Blood, Monolith makes an officially licensed like Vampire the Masquerade game. Oh, yeah. in like a similar with some of those bells and whistles and all that interactivity like added in there. There's a parallel dimension out there where something like that happened.
It is funny though. It feels like the FPS games they got really big and then they got very linear and then they got very big again and now we're back to linear again. Really, that's what things have kind of ended up.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll see where things will go from there. Which brings us nicely to the quiz, which we're doing something a little bit interesting this episode because the shareware release came out on March. Well, so it would have qualified for the charts of March 8th, 1997. Now, unfortunately, because it was a shareware game, it isn't properly reflected in the all formats charts. But because I was playing this game on fresh supply, I thought, why don't we do a comparison? So I'm going to ask you what the top 5 games were March 8th, 1997, and then I'm going to ask you what the top 5 games were May 9th, 2019. And we're going to see how the charts differ a little bit.
Okay.
So we're going to start with 1997. So Chris, if you want to throw your answer out, you can. We don't have buzzers or anything like that, unfortunately. It's just whoever gets their answer in first. So,
oh god,
this is from Chart Track. So number 1 this week, March 8th, a non-mover from last week, a Nintendo 64 game, maybe the most Nintendo 64 game.
It can't be GoldenEye because that didn't release that early in the year, did it?
It's not
Okay.
GoldenEye, no.
Super Mario 64.
It is Super Mario 64. Yep. Still in the charts in 97. That's the power of Super Mario 64. And then I'll move from last week.
And, you know, with Nintendo, you're playing with power.
That's very true, yes. Number 2 in the charts, new this week, is another N64 game, but this one is a first-person shooter. But it's not.
Can I go?
Yeah,
Go
go
ahead.
in whenever you want.
I believe Turok came out around that time of that year.
It is Turok Dinosaur Hunter. Yep, that is number 2 in the charts. Good stuff. Now, number 3 in the charts, down from second place from last week, is a PC, PS1, and Saturn game. It is an... I was about to say it's an adventure game, but not... It's a certain kind of adventure game. It is a franchise that is still sort of going to this day.
Resident Evil 2.
It's not Resident Evil, no.
Alone in the Dark?
It's not Alone in the Dark either. I think calling it an adventure game is... In my head, it's an adventure game, but because you kind of go on an adventure. It's sort of an action platformy game, but the platforming... Resident Evil-wise, the platforming is very digital in it. I'm trying... I don't want to give the obvious clue, because that would give it away immediately. You start in a snowy cave in this game.
You start in a snowy
Start in a snowy cave.
And you...
Full of traps.
No, it can't be that game.
PS1, Saturn, and PC, you said?
Yes.
And you start in a snowy cave. And you can't give us a developer or a publisher? Would that give it
If I
away?
give...
I know.
I'll give you the publisher, it's Eidos.
I know. It's Tomb Raider.
Yeah. It's Tomb Raider. Down from second place this week. Tomb Raider. Still sort of going strong today. Shadow of the Tomb Raider came out 3-4 years ago. I don't know. They'll make a new one
They'll
soon.
make another one
Looking forward
at
to
some
it.
point.
Yeah. Number 4, down from third place. It's a sports game for the PS1. But which one? Sports series that's still going even to this day.
I mean, that's a lot of them.
Oh, yeah, but...
Madden.
Not Madden, it's the other one. It's the one that it's the two that people always have to guess on bullet time, and it's either Madden or it's
FIFA?
it is FIFA 97 for the PS1. And then number 5, new this week, is one which is going to be slightly harder to get, I think, so I'll do my best. It is a PC, PS1, and Saturn game developed by Psygnosis.
The Lego guys?
No.
Who am I
The
thinking
Lego
of?
guys are
Psygnosis is...
Traveler's Tales.
Oh, it's because they both have the owls. And I'm trying to remember.
That's right, yeah.
What's the...
Psygnosis, known for publishing Lemmings, developing Wipeout, and this game that I feel like no one remembers.
What's the genre?
It's kind of driving.
Kind of driving.
Is it? Oh, go ahead.
Is it like something like I don't know? I was gonna say Stuntman.
No, it's not Stuntman, although, Chris, what was your guess?
Well, before I guess, when you say it's kind of... is it Driver?
It's not Driver, no, which is, that's Reflections, and the one that you said, Kev, I don't think that's a Psygnosis game either. Driving is part of this game. This game is a lot like Twisted Metal, but it's not Twisted Metal.
Vigilante 8?
It's not Vigilante 8, no. When they released the PS1...
I was going to say Interstate 76?
No,
I was about to guess Interstate 76.
When they released the PS1 Classic a couple of years ago, the mini console, this for some reason was on it. It was full of licensed music, like Wipeout was as well. It had like a lot of like drum and bass and stuff in it.
Was it Road Rash?
No, it's not Road Rash.
Jet Moto?
It's not Jet Moto either. It's a car combat game. Then
Right.
It's car combat. Like, I could just give this one to you.
Yeah,
I'm trying to because if I described it even further, I would just say the name, which is Destruction Derby. Apparently, a PS1 classic, Destruction Derby.
Yeah.
So wasn't that a car combat game where there were no weapons and you just sort of had to rub up on each other?
No, you just bashed into each other. You still did the race, but you just bashed into each other. It wasn't a very good game.
And this predates like damage models on cars, so it really was just boxy cars bouncing off of one another.
Pretty much, yeah. Not good. At number 6 this week is Die Hard Trilogy. Number 7 is Destruction Derby 2. So for some reason, the sequel put the first one back in the charts. At 8 is Command and Conquer Red Alert. At 9 is Cool Borders for the PS1. And then finally, at number 10 this week, Shadow of the Empire for the N64. That's what people had to enjoy.
That's what I was going to say when you say it started in a snowy cave. I was like, there's a snowy cave level in that game.
Yeah, there is.
There is, yeah.
Was it Dash Rendar was the main character?
Yeah, Dash Rendar.
Yeah.
God, who was the Cal Katarn?
Kyle Katarn was the other
in the Jedi games that we were playing. So that's the kind of games that you could enjoy in 97. But let's compare that to the games that you could enjoy May 9th, 2019, when Fresh Supply came out. Oh, and just as a heads up for you two and also the people at home, Blood didn't qualify in 97, and Fresh Supply didn't even make the charts, unfortunately. It's a shame, because it's a really good port, and it's good fun. Now, this is the all platforms charts. So at number 1 is all of these are non-movers, so these haven't changed much in regards to like what's in certain positions. So number 1 is a game. It's an open world PS4 game, and it's a Sony exclusive.
2019?
In 2019, yeah.
Is it Horizon?
It's not Horizon, no.
Is it open world 2019? Would that have been... but that's not Sony exclusive. Oh.
What were you thinking?
Spider-Man.
It's not Spider-Man either. I would say this is the one that nobody likes of their open world games.
This is the one nobody likes.
It's the one nobody likes.
Is it the ninja one?
Oh, it's not Ghost of Tsushima,
Okay.
no.
That's just Raz that doesn't like that one.
Yeah. Yeah. God. I'm trying to like think of like clues to give that aren't like totally immediate. Developed by a Sony studio that hadn't made a game in a long time until this one.
So not Japan studio.
Not Japan studio, no. An American-based studio, best known for developing Bubsy 3D.
That doesn't help.
Well, they developed Bubsy 3D and then they went on to do the Siphon Filter games, and then 1,000 years later made Days... Oh, shit, I gave it away. Whoops.
Oh, Days Gone?
Yeah, it was Days Gone. Oh, whoops. Days Gone are number 1 this week with PS4.
You know,
No.
I only played Days Gone for like 10 minutes, I think. And I was like, am I missing something? These characters are all talking like I should be knowing things, and I don't know. Anyway.
Whoops. Sorry, everybody at home for doing that. Number 2 in the charts is a fighting game for the PS4 and the Xbox One. A long-running franchise.
2019. This would have been... Oh, fudge. Tekken?
It's not Tekken, no.
I know a new Soul Calibur came out, but I don't think it's that.
No, it's not Soul Calibur either.
You said PlayStation and Xbox, right?
Yeah, it's multi-platform, but
Yeah.
Oh, I think a Switch version came out as well, but that didn't.
Right.
Is it Mortal Kombat 11?
It is Mortal Kombat 11.
There we go.
At number 2 this week. Nice. Number 3 in the charts is a sports game. But which one is it?
What was the date we're looking at again? Because typically FIFA would be, I think, in the spring and football would be fall.
That is true. It is May time, so it is spring.
I would go with FIFA.
Yeah, so it is. It's FIFA 2019 for all platforms.
There we go.
FIFA 97 was in the last.
Chris finally cracked the code because I just kind of guess Madden and FIFA whenever the date.
I had it burned into my head by EA's crappy Madden Holidays advertisements. So every fall is the Madden Holidays, and I cannot not have that thought.
Yeah.
What were we talking about earlier? The Toyota.
We were talking about Toyota. We were talking about Toyotathon, and that you need to decorate your Christmas tree accordingly when it's Toyotathon.
Oh yeah, for the Toyotathon.
Yeah.
Number 4 on the charts this week. It is a open world game, but which one?
Grand Theft Auto 5?
Grand Theft Auto 5 is number 5 in the charts this week.
Oh.
So this is above Grand Theft Auto 5.
RDR2?
It is Red Dead Redemption 2, another Rockstar open world.
Those things
game.
just print money for Rockstar. It's incredible.
Yeah, that's why they only release one game every 7 years now, because they can just make one and it makes money forever.
So Grand Theft Auto 5, from when it was released in 2013, has not left the charts, and I don't think has left the top 10 of the charts since. It is a money printer. As well as, at number 6 on the charts this week is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which also has never left the charts. Yeah. Even when it was a Wii U game, it was still really high on.
That's the wild thing about Mario Kart 8 is that it on the Switch, it was a port from the Wii U version, and it's just kept going. Nintendo's just fuck it. Keep it.
Well,
let's just see how long it can go.
And then all the DLC is ported from the mobile game, right? So it's just
it's all the tracks of Mario Kart World Tour, which bizarre. It's like the only instance of a future game has come out and they've gone, more people are playing the old one. Let's move these tracks over. No one will notice.
Yep.
At number 7 on the charts this week is Tom Clancy's The Division 2. At number 8 is New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. At number 9 is Forza Horizon 4, and at number 10 this week is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate for the Nintendo Switch.
There we go.
So, quite a interesting thing. Number 10 in the charts this year is Smash Bros., and 10 the year, of years past was Shadows of the Empire for the N64. What does that say about games? Where are they today?
I don't know. Says something.
No.
We used to be a country.
Something poignant.
We used to be a proper
something
country.
Something poignant, I hope. Exactly. Chris, it has been lovely having you on to talk about Blood.
Yeah, it's been fun.
To do the charts. Yeah, this has been good fun. We'll have to have you back again. You're the FPS guy. We got to talk about more old FPS games with you. There are a lot more. So hopefully you'll come back for that. Before we wrap things up, are there any plugs? Any last things you want to shout out?
No, I run a YouTube channel over at youtube.com/errantsignal, and that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Well, I'll be sure to point people towards that. And Kevin, once again, thank you for coming back to talk about a game.
Thanks.
Do you feel we gave Blood the respect it deserved?
I think so. I think we did a proper bloodletting this episode.
Hey, there you go. Nice. Any plugs? Anything you want people to have a look at? I can think what it might be, but I'll let you say it.
Yeah. Go check out PixelLit Pod, the PixelLit podcast. We read, recap, and review video game novelizations, and you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at PixelLit Pod, and our website's pixelitpod.com, where you can find our Steam curator page, our Discord, and transcripts of every episode.
Nice. I've been James. You can follow me on Twitter over at HotCyder, HOTCYDER. You can also help support the podcast and our projects over on the Patreon, which is also at HotCyder. Next week, We're starting a brand new mini-series. Very exciting times. We'll be looking at the games of Free Radical Design Limited, the developers who left Rare after they worked on GoldenEye and Perfect Dark, and then went on to make Time Splitters games and all other sorts of stuff. We'll be joined by a new guest host for that, Tisnaker, so I hope you will come and join and listen to that. Till next time, though, folks, keep blooding.
Pew, 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 pew.
The Bullet Time podcast is made possible by Eric Hamilton Schneider, Valerie B, VG, and the Hot Cider support tier. If you'd like to help with the production of episodes and gain access to extra content, consider supporting over at patreon.com/Hot Cider. That's HOTCYDER. A special thanks to Max Coburn for the Bullet Time theme tune.